Welcome to the HR Fix, the HR podcast for HR professionals who want to grow and be the best. I'm Jude Fiddler and I'll be your host, so come and join us on our journey as we change an entire industry. Come on, let's get started. HR is not hard. I know so many HR professionals right now who are going through this is really hard and this is really complicated and this is really complex. And I want to make the point that it doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter if you're dealing with a simple matter or a complex matter because we apply the same principles. So it's about understanding those principles. And those principles come down to this. Are you ready for this? They come down to common sense, to having the right mindsets, and the ability to build rapport. That is all HR is. Everything else can be picked up, everything else can be taught. But if you've got common sense, our duty inside of HR, the burden that we have to reach and the burden that the courts look for, the tribunals look at, is whether or not we were reasonable, whether or not we were fair. A lot of that comes down to common sense, and a lot of that is just the ability to build rapport. If we've gone into a meeting and we are screaming at somebody, you have done this and how dare you, that is not the ability to build rapport. That is also not common sense. We have to understand that actually our roles are, we talk about the power of language inside of and the HR, that when we say to somebody on a Friday afternoon, I need to see you in my office, for a meeting at 3:45, we know that that has a certain amount of power. So we know that our words count. So we have to understand, and it's just common sense, that certain things that we do, it's not about the rules, it's not about the law, it's about common sense, it's about building rapport. And it's about having this right mindset and about always willing to be growing and having a growth mindset. If we are a processor and we say, no, this is the way it's going to be, this is the way we have to, that is when we're going to find it hard because we're not opening our minds to learning new things and to finding differences in the way that we have been doing HR to the way that we should be doing HR. Myself and my team, especially me, learn something every single day. I've been doing this for 25 years and I learn something new, at least one thing new, probably more, 5 or 6 things, and learning something new and a new way of looking at something and a new way of developing at something that helps an employer, that helps an employee, that means that we are safer and better at what we do. And that's why we're building our HR operating system. But there's so many HR professionals that come to me on a regular basis. It's so hard. It's so complex. There's a matter that I just can't do. It just means that we haven't understood properly, possibly our remit, and also what our principles are, what our founding principles are. Because like I say, it doesn't matter if it's an easy concept or a hard concept that we're dealing with or an issue. The same concepts are going to always apply. I want to assure you of that. And that's why we're talking about these concepts. That's what we're doing in this podcast about victim mentality, accountability, all of these things, common sense, right? When you start applying them in the right way, it will make you better at your job. So I want to give you some examples about why I'm saying HR is not hard. I have recently met a group of people who all learn languages, and they tell me, oh my gosh, it's so hard to learn language, especially in a certain age. It's really, really hard, and you have to learn about the exceptions to these rules, and then you learn this rule, and this happens, and and it's really hard. And going through it is really tricky. And you have to learn, and you have to be dedicated, you have to be committed, you have to put in the hours, right? That's what it's all about. But once you pass a certain point and it clicks, you can speak that language, it becomes second nature to you. It's no longer hard once you pass that point. And yes, there's going to be embarrassment along the way. You're going to go into a cafe in a certain country and you're going to ask for something that's the wrong thing. But it's embarrassing, but you have to go through that pain in order to get to the good bit, in order for that click to happen, for it all to fall into place. The same as learning a musical instrument. How many times do you have to go through your scales? How many times do you have to be annoying your parents, your friends, your family, whoever it is by, I used to learn the violin. And my family said, I'm flipping at you. When are you going to give that up? Because you just sound like you're, cats. You just sound like you are grating cats. And they had to go through all that. And you're thinking, actually, at a certain point when you pass grade 5 or 6 or 7 and you can play the musical instrument, something clicks. It falls into place. It's no longer hard. I remember right at the start of learning violin, it hurts your fingers. I'm a fiddler, right? So I had to learn violin. That it hurts your fingers. It hurts the positioning, the neck. When you have to have this, it hurts. It's not a natural thing to be doing, but at a certain point, it clicks. It all falls into place. It makes sense. And then suddenly it's a pleasure to play. People want you to play. They encourage you to play. It's no longer a chore. It's no longer this pain that you have to go through it because you experienced it, you've put in the hours. And there's other things like this as well. If you're learning a sport, if you're driving a car, all of these things seem really complex and they seem like it's painful. It seems like it's really, really hard. You can't get through it. But you pass a certain point, and literally HR is no different. We have to reach this point. But what we're doing and what we're helping, I've been where you are inside of HR, believe me. But what we're doing is we are saying that as well as common sense, as well as having the right mindset, and as well as building rapport, you need a HR operating strategy. You need your own system. You need your own principles that are guiding you. And that will help you get there quicker. You don't necessarily need experience and qualifications. I know that the old question that I keep being asked every time I go into different companies, and they're saying, well, which one is it that you're recruiting for at the moment? Or which one do you think is the more relevant for HR roles? So would you employ somebody who's got better qualifications or more experience? And my answer to this, and it's taken me a long time to reach this answer because I've had to live through it and understand, who I've employed and what I've learned from those lessons. But my answer to that is neither. You can easily have somebody with a HR qualification who, is the high CIPD level 7, have got masters in HR, a masters in human management, whatever, and they haven't learned a thing. They have got no practical sense of what that means. They're learning the theory, but actually when you work at it in practice, it's a totally different ball game. It's a totally different thing. The two things don't even relate. And I liken it to learning how to drive a car, but actually somebody giving you a car mechanics manual. And that's the theory, it's not the practical. So somebody who's coming along with qualification doesn't really mean anything to me, especially if that qualification was 5 years ago or 10 years ago and they haven't done anything since. That's actually a red flag to me, because that proves that they're a fixed mindset, that they haven't been developing themselves ever since. That's when it comes to qualification. When it comes to experience, I used to think, oh, so it's all about, it can't be about qualification, it has to be about experience. Therefore, I want somebody who is in my role for 5 years or 10 years, they've already been in the HR industry, they know what it is. That's not true either. That doesn't work, because you could get somebody who's been in HR, who's been, just say, for example, in a shared service. They've been sending out offer letters for 5 years of their 10 years of their employment. And actually all they can do is an offer letter. But actually, it's not even designing or crafting an offer letter because it's a template. So actually that is their very, very, very limited experience. And they're coming around saying, oh, I've got 5 years experience in HR. Actually, you have a very narrow and limited experience, which makes it dangerous, because you're now mixing with and being treated at the same level as other people who have a generalist experience or background in HR, being compared to them. And you're never going to live up to that expectation as somebody who has been, at the coalface doing different things inside of HR. And that's the sort of, you wouldn't obviously be interviewing that person for that role at that level, but you get my point. Even in a generalist HR role, I've got managers who I've interviewed and I've asked a specific certain questions in a certain way, and they've been in the profession, whatever it is, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, 20 years, and they still do not understand that things that they have been doing and they've been doing wrong for so long, they've not become unstuck from, because that maybe they had a good culture where people just left after a certain time, but they could have had huge cases against them, and that things have been going wrong, but they were just lucky, or what we call bad decisions, good outcomes, or good decisions, bad outcomes. It just because you haven't been sued, you haven't been in tribunal, or something's happened, doesn't mean necessarily that you made the right decision in the right way. And unless you're understanding of these things, then experience doesn't mean anything. Experience can't mean anything. Most companies will have a gross misconception, especially smaller companies. Maybe you've got 50 members of staff, maybe 100 members of staff, 100 members of staff, 80. I think 80 members of staff is the level where most people think they need a HR manager. So about 80 members, maybe a few less. So if you're working in a smaller business, maybe 80 to 100 members of staff, you're likely to have a gross misconduct dismissal every 3 or 4 years. You're likely to have a redundancy issue every 4 or 5 years. You're likely not to have the experience. If you've been there for 10 years, you're likely to have 1 or 2 of each of these issues. You won't have a great deal of experience in these things. So to go around and say, oh, I've got 10 years experience, doesn't probably mean that much. It probably means that you got away with a lot of things. A very good example, I was interviewing somebody for a role maybe a month ago who told me literally that you could sack someone on text, because that was, especially if they were off sick, because it was a good thing. It meant that they had it in writing. You'd understood the reasons. I'm sacking you because you're off on sick leave. And there was a text message, because that saved the need for a face-to-face confrontation. And that was a good thing. And I'm like, how can you possibly think, well, it didn't lead me to any problems. There wasn't an appeal process. The person left with P45 them, paid them their outstanding holiday, and that was the end of that. Therefore, that was a good process. That's what experience does to us. We're doing the wrong things. We think it's for the right reasons. We're doing the wrong things. And then we build our confidence based on those issues. And I'm finding now more and more that people who think that they have good experience and long-term experience inside of the industry have anything but. And that is a really huge problem. So what I'm saying is that to have your own HR operating system, or to provide the HR operating system that we can give you, and that's all about our movement, that's all about what we're doing with our HR mindset and our HR mind shift, is to provide this operating system that means that actually it's not about experience. It's not about qualification. It's not about playing your scales and driving other people crazy, or about going into cafes and speaking the wrong language and getting into trouble and being embarrassed. If you have an operating system that you can adopt from other people, that's not about experience, not about qualification, but is about the 3 things: having a growth mindset, being able to build rapport, and being open and have to this, using this operating system that actually can get you there quicker. But HR is not hard. I hope that makes sense. Looking forward to your comments. Have a great day. Happy HRing.